do the analysis of the keyword, and then we'll declare that we're open.
So Walter, we keep seeing smoke wafting by your face. Is that
Yes.
It's a thing I'm
incense or
trying.
is the house on fire?
Nah, it's just a thing I'm trying.
Oh, okay. You're going up in smoke.
I believe it's the incense. So,
Cheech and Chong movie.
say again?
Isn't that a Cheech and Chong movie?
Yeah, it is. Certainly is.
Is there anything that we should have in the way of text or anything else
Nope.
before we get started? Okay.
No. Although there may be some things I'll provide later if you guys want them. But you know, our first order of business here is to reiterate that this is not, you know, going to church on Sunday and then on Monday morning you're, you know, back to 6 monkeys fighting over a trash can lid. But all of these little things, like how you open the veil and how you do the analysis of the keyword and everything, these all have a use and a reason to use them all the time. And we will do that too. So I'm sort of assuming you've all done a personal banishing today, and we won't take time with that. But to properly open the veil, you really need some energy. And this is one of the first things taught in the GD, and it should not be abandoned at this level. So you need to do the Kabbalistic cross. And it's not just a salute as you walk in and out the door in the portal ritual. It actually is a way to reach up as far as you can imagine and get some. And that's what everyone should do first. But we can, I'll repeat that when John comes back and Maria appears.
Walter, as far as churchgoers are concerned, they don't have to wait till Monday. If you've ever seen people leaving the parking lot after a church service, you know, it starts right then.
Oh, well, I know, and I know that it's a bit of a, I mean, we can go back 100 years and see the complaints from the clergy and from the Masons bemoaning brothers sitting around the lodge in their shirt sleeves, which was not done, you know, and all this sort of thing. The very casual way people treated the sacraments and the various practices. It's just human nature. I mean, it's not, but someone, and in this case, the imperator and or the chief adept, you know, have taken certain oaths to militate against those things, you know. And I know it's, you know, finger wagging, and I don't particularly like it, but to consecrate something is to set it aside as special, you know, and you have to do this with the material things, with your various practices, and with various aspects of yourself, you know. And if you trivialize these things, like if you're selling Rose Cross lamens on the internet that you made in your basement, shame on you, Chick Cicero. I just think that's absolutely wrong. And I'll go into detail a little bit more as we talk about how the system's meant to work, about why that's so incorrect. So let's see. Okay. It's,
Maria's still on her way.
well, all right, everyone
Never
should
mind, she just arrived.
take a moment and really do the Kabbalistic cross and gather up as much as they can so we can open the veil. And if you want to do it privately, that's maybe better. I don't know. So it's up to you. But let's get going here. And again, reach up. You don't have to do it out loud or anything, but you have to feel it. And you have to make yourself really big, and you have to grasp from above as much energy as you can draw down. Other gestures taught actually work in different ways. So this one's pretty unique. And so I'll do this one because I'll bet Fran doesn't know. The current password, if we didn't send it to you, the current password is, anyone? Yeah, I kind of knew that. Cum reverentia, with reverence.
Walter,
And
we only got the first word in Latin, then it was blank.
well, you speak Latin.
Cum reverentio.
Okay. The reason this was selected is because it's something very, very important and is the beginning of successful ceremonial magic. And everyone can do it, even if you can't memorize 2 pages of dialogue or, tables out of 777, even if you're not a gifted psychic, if you can't, you don't have the mental acuity to sort of contemplate or calculate all the Kabbalistic and gematria associations to someone's name while you're sitting down at lunch, you can do this part. Everyone can do this part with advantage. It is the beginning of successful ceremonial. All right. So having done that, would someone give us the password for the veil? Someone other than Laura, give us the password for the veil. Nobody? Okay, it is Pei, Kaf, Resh, Tau, or Pei. It's actually given two ways in the ritual. So it would be Pei, Resh, Kaf, Tau. Also, just point out here, as pointed out to me by our most gifted scholar, those are the letters for the 4 eastern walls of the vault, just by maybe. And they also spell another word very important in the vault.
Okay. Yeah.
Arquette.
Arquette and
Arquette for the portal.
Laura,
Yes.
tell us,
About the rest, Caporet.
which is
Caporet, which is the cover of the Holy of Holies, the Ark of the Covenant.
right. And this is super important because the lid of the pastos kind of takes the place of the diagram on the altar in every previous grade, which go in sequence all the way up to what's in the vault. Now, does anybody know the full analysis of the keyword?
I know Harney does. Probably both the Harneys do.
Right, so someone needs to give that, and then we need to declare that the vault is open.
What was the questioning? I'm sorry, I missed that one.
The analysis of the keyword.
The
All right,
keyword.
so I'm not trying to be, your fourth grade math teacher, but this is something you should use on a regular basis. And when I get into the house, we will discuss this specifically. So it is, I'm gonna give you the first word and somebody give me the rest. Okay? Yod,
Noon,
Resh,
Yod,
Virgo, Isis, Mighty Mother,
Scorpio, Apophis, Destroyer,
Sol,
Sol,
Osiris,
slain and risen.
Isis, Apophis, Osiris, Eo.
So that's roughly the way it's done when you enter the vault the first time. And afterwards, there is the following decoration. By the keyword Inri and the hidden word Yeshua, I declare that I have opened the portal of the vault of the Adepti. Without the benefit of my wand or robe. This can be followed, like if you're doing it by yourself, it should be followed with the admonition given to the candidate the first time in the vault, which is be thy mind open to the higher. Anybody? What's next?
thy heart a center of light.
And be thy body a temple of the Rose and Cross. So that's what's said to the candidate. You can always do this yourself, and I'm going to tell you where it's really useful in a few minutes. So here we are. We have declared the vault to be open. So this is a real second order meeting. And I think these formalities, and this is just my theory, but I was told 10 or 12 years ago by a mentor, if you want to start a Golden Dawn temple, just do the neophyte ritual. And if you look at the ritual itself, the first thing it does is it declares the place and the purpose and the offices and their duties and all that sort of thing. So if you want to make a hall, do the ritual, and to some degree, I think that will, that worked surprisingly well in a short amount of time. And I think if we do this, if you guys do this on your own, it will help with establishing the inner order. And I think everyone should do it. If we were going to talk about important things today, I think the first important thing really is why. Why do we do this? Why in this manner? Why is the order important? Why is advancing in the order important, etc.? Now, most of these answers are in, they're right there in the rituals. And most especially, and I've certainly said this before, read Flying Roll 15. It was Westcott's address to the inner order, probably, well, at least 100 years ago. And, but actually more than that. I believe it was in the very early 1890s when things were getting a little dicey between him and Mathers. And there was a lot of argument about where authority for the order came from and what it was supposed to accomplish, and good and evil, all these burning questions that they were chewing on. And it was a time when people were quickly leaving the churches and quickly getting really, really sucked into the modern world and the industrial age and modern theories about cognition and spirituality and things like that, that the old explanations didn't fit anymore. And they were really trying to design something new that would work for modern people who had a scientific education and so forth. And well, read Flying Roll 50. It's really, really, really quite interesting. And the mindset of the time was far less dogmatic than today, where people want to, get on a message board somewhere and debate the difference between, how you spell Kabbalah or, all these things. And we have become increasingly dogmatic about magic and which spell will work and which will not, and if you're a Thellemite, you shouldn't do it that way, and all these things. And it's so childish and kind of pointless compared to what they were trying to do 100 years ago, where Westcott says to people, this culture had gods that look like this, and this other culture had, gods that did this and that, and be careful what gods you make. Well, that is a very modern point of view, and we've been actually sliding away from it. And then, well, along with why does it matter? Well, consciousness matters, and elevated consciousness and expanded consciousness matter. And people are pretty mediocre at this, despite, sort of concentrated little places like Tibet, where they actually worked very, very hard at it. For the most part, people just want to find something to believe. They don't want to understand believing. And to just give you an example, in Tibet, you might build up what I believe the word is tanka. They would build up a symbol and some kind of idea about a god, maybe a completely fictitious one, utterly personal, answers all your personal questions. And they would build up a religion around this, and more symbols and more, as much complexity as they could create, to the point where they don't really remember if it's real or not, or that they thought it up. Then they would destroy it and be done with it. What does this suggest? Well, it suggests to me liberation. And there are many things in the GD that work this way. If you work them that way, you build up the pyramids on the squares, which have nothing to do with John Dee. And then the gods that sit on them, and the Sphinx that's inside. And this all relates really well to the four worlds and the four parts of the soul, according to the Kabbalah. And they would create these, and it was all informed by which elements are where, and, are they moving in a direction? And, you kind of have to study some of the other subsystems to get the full whack out of this. But why would you do this over and over again? To be free of it is one way, and one reason to be utterly free of it. So, as the world gets crazier, our system and the Tibetan system as well will become more important for ordinary people who aren't going to live to be 275 years old. That is not as far off in the future as you might imagine, and it will change everything. The uber rich technoids will have phenomenal control over this and that. And for other people, you'll be down to magic and yoga. And passing some of this inner knowledge on is worth doing, in my opinion. And doing it one person at a time by means of initiation is, again, in my opinion, is worth the effort for all of you to move from being an initiate to becoming an initiator and taking up the tasks of those offices and the task of not being you, which is part of what has to happen. That's a whole bunch of internal work, and I think totally worth doing. The pitfall that we see over and over again is, and temple leaders from around the country, from around the world will tell you, yeah, all my 5-6s quit, or all my, they all get to 5-6 and then they don't do anything, or something along those lines. Sometimes you could describe whole groups that way. And the problem is right here. Heard someone chuckle. So somebody knows what I'm talking about.
You heard a couple people chuckle.
Well, I will explain this as though I just thought of it. I didn't, but you no doubt have all noticed, or certainly some of you have noticed, that unlike the early grades, we couldn't necessarily say this about 00, but unlike 110 through Portal, 5-6 ritual does not mention the paths ahead. Now, this is a big section of the Portal, and it's a big section of 4-7 where you go down this path and you go down that path and you're shown a tarot card, and 5-6 doesn't do this. It's as though the 5-6 exists outside of time. You're in the vault, and the only way out is to go back the way you came. So that would mean, going down the tree. I don't know if you guys can see this one, right? So you can take the devil path, and end up doing a lot of thinking here in Hode, and thinking, about right and wrong, and about power, and where people end up is often for a very long time is the path of the hanged man. And if we study this key a little bit, the hanged man is hanging by one foot, can do nothing, and is hanging from a towel, which towel means cross. It represents crucifixion. And if we go back and study the 5-6 ritual, the answer to this problem is right there. The candidate is released from the cross of suffering, after accepting the oath and withstanding the stigmata. And that's how you get out of here and get the admonition in the vault. So my point here is two. One, many of these kind of dilemmas that will be coming up are right there. They're either in the symbolism taught, or they're in the actual ritual, and you got to look. And then you have to put it into practice. So you have to put that admonition that the candidate receives in the vault into practice. Pardon me while I investigate my notes. The other, I think, very large question not so much about why, but well, okay, yeah, of course, this fits why. People who join a mystical or magical order want something for themselves. They want to know, where do I put in the launch codes? How do I, get what I want out of life? How do I get control over the environment, et cetera, et cetera? These are, perfectly legitimate questions. They shouldn't surprise anyone. And everyone has these questions. And stuffing your head with all of this symbolism doesn't necessarily give you any of that. It may give you some, but you have to follow through. In the big picture, the system begins with many divination methods, and then you have to actually use them. You have to figure out where the pieces on the map are, and you have to figure out what's coming next, so you can be standing on the right street corner on that day. And that's why so many methods are given. And I should point out, you're not expected to master them all. You're expected to learn the parts that overlap. All these subsystems in the system, overlap with the other pieces. And sometimes it's very confusing. And a lot of people stop because it's sort of overwhelming. And the thing that I don't see this anywhere, but I've been told by some of the scholars that no one was ever expected to master it all. You were expected to learn the parts that were tested on, and you were expected to try these various things. But in general, the members of the original temples, the leaders and the chiefs all had a couple of areas that they knew very, very well. And the others were ask Joey, and that was considered okay if you did the required work. So the first thing is to expand your perceptions through these divination systems and begin to understand what's going on in the macrocosm and proceed from there. You can do all the rituals and spells you want. If you're going in the wrong direction, if you're fighting the tides, not much is going to happen. And the rules of thumb given in other systems, like say chaos magic, is something like 30%. If 30% of your spells work, you're doing good. If only 30% of your divinations work, you've got a problem. And how much that can change is, I think that's very individual. And maybe depends on other kinds of work. I know when I was 25, I had a head like concrete. That has been changing over the years, but if I don't pay attention, I just go back to my old habits of putting my head down and, keep chopping, and that doesn't always work. So this is the next major thing is, one, expand your perceptions, and then expand your thinking, break your habits, et cetera, et cetera. This was a very, very big deal. And the last area I think is somewhat personal. And we're now drifting into conclusions I've made myself. I am supposed to let you make your own about these particular things. So I'm breaking the rules here a little bit because it doesn't often happen that people piece these things together. And there are many reasons for that. The condition of modern publishing and the editorial comments from people like Regardie and so forth have kind of broken this a little bit. Regardie was taught by someone, probably a Kabbalist, that you're only potentially immortal, and that you had to figure that out. Now that can be found in, that very idea can be found in various writings from various cultures and various orthodoxies. But in the GD, we're told really important things right in the beginning. In the neophyte ritual, we're told that the fires of created beings arise from darkness and obscurity. And we have discussed again and again the two contending forces and the one force uniting them. My opinion is that the two contending forces are the part of you that will most certainly live and the part of you that most certainly will die. And they have competing and quite contradictory agendas, you know. Some things have to happen right now, and some things can happen whenever, someday, and all that. And to straighten that out and make sense out of it is a kind of adeptship. Now, let me find this. If you could imagine, well, let's go back to Tibet for a second. The Dalai Lama says, you know, don't worry about astral projection. That's just practice. And it's practice for not having a body. And if you go to the Egyptian Book of the Dead, it's got all of these, at the beginning, there are all these preparatory things. I greet the carpet, and I greet the lintels of the door, and I greet the doorknob. It's all, if you step back and look at it a little bit, it's like someone trying to figure out, you know, hey, how's this work? What am I, you know, someone trying to get oriented in space-time. And that's very curious. That's very, very curious. And if you look at the advanced Golden Dawn papers, there's tons of this. If you look at the macrocosm, it's called the microcosm man, is the tree of life sort of superimposed over a human, and the full instruction says you must begin to imagine the whole star field at your moment of birth. Which way were you facing? Where are the constellations and all that? And then there are star maps, and there's the tarot mapped over the constellations, and then there's the convoluted forces paper, which most of you probably haven't spent any time with. Really, really, really quite interesting stuff. And a lot of it is about getting oriented in space-time, and sort of morphs it together with Kabbalah. And all of these pieces can be fitted together into a whole. There's so much detail, it's hard to, maybe it takes years and years to do. Some of you were taught where you were first taught. Once you could walk around the room and banish, you were taught to sit down and then make your astral self get up and walk around the room and banish. I don't know when this was started, but it comes from the Z papers, which have a section called the Sheen of Sheen. And in the Sheen of Sheen, and you can see an example in Regardie's Black Book, his example of the Sheen of Sheen ritual, which he wrote for his teachers when he was very new. He never revised it. It's kind of a wreck. This is the origin of this idea. And in the Sheen of Sheen, the Adeptus Minor, and sometime later they gave it out maybe at Adeptus Major. The Adeptus Minor would robe up in black, park themselves in the west of the hall, and then create, like creating a god form, themselves in their white robe with all their regalia and weapons, and then repeat some version of the neophyte ritual for themselves. So they themselves would initiate themselves. And this was the reason you had to make your Lotus Wand. You had to make your elemental weapons, because buying them would do nothing for you, nothing. You have to make them, and you have to really work on them so you can see them in your mind's eye with your eyes closed. Super, super important. once you can do this, you begin to add together the other papers all the way up through the convoluted forces and the vault. You know, the vault, in one way, it's kind of the center of the whole, you know, temple, but you also need to be able to visualize it to the point where you have your own and you can carry it around and in your head. And if you look at the diagrams and you look at like the vault consecration ritual, and then you look at the advanced papers and you piece it all together, and I would suggest spend some time with the shewbread diagram and the vault consecration ritual and the convoluted forces, and then look at the final piece that fits into this is the full color scales on all 4 tablets. This all has a meaning. It's kind of the end goal. And I don't really want to just spill it all out. You kind of need to look at this and piece it together for yourself. But it has as much to do with the Shin of Shin as anything else. I haven't seen anyone, occasionally people hint, but mostly the advanced people in GD don't talk about this publicly. Because to really take it seriously, you have to hit on some of the things that stick it together yourself. Me talking about it is really just a kick in the ass. So the why is, well, one, we're going to need all this in the future, and two, you need it for yourself, or you're going to be stuck with things that other people have given to you. With you know, where you live in your head is where you go when you leave your head. So why don't you take over that process and you know, get out in front of it, own it, create it. Unless you took the oath for some other reason. You know, the oath includes 2 very important things. One, that you will work unassisted, and 2, that you will make yourself more than human. And I can't tell you what those things mean to you. Only you can decide that. But you did take that oath for some reason. Comments, questions? Walter, shut up. What?
Walter, go on, please.
Well, I'm, yeah. Well, what more might we say about that? These are not easy things to do, but if you start with the banishing and you go on to the Shin of Shin, and then you perform the same kind of thing in the vault. In New Zealand, they came up with a healing ritual called the lighthouse ritual. And a person at the grade of 6'5" was allowed or encouraged to, from their home temple, project to the actual physical vault, and then project out through the ceiling, and then gather energy from, you know, somewhere. That's not really, as I recall, that's not really specified in the paper, but you're supposed to project healing energy out to anyone that needed it. Now, this is on the order of, in terms of being altruistic, this is on the order with the advanced Elu Cohen kind of ritual. And that's Martinism. Martinism is a close cousin to the GD in a number of ways, number of important ways. The other thing that still amazes me, if you look at the progression of the diagrams in the various grades up through 5, 6, and the sort of open-ended things they left behind, like the kind of complex color scales. Well, the intelligence behind the system just blows me away. The idea of going from the elemental colors on the tablets, which are conceived of as being around the vault. That's what we're told in the consecration ritual. Well, consecration ritual has the elements on the altar in a certain order, on in the hexagram order, in the macrocosmic order inside. So you've got the microcosmic order outside the 4 tablets, and then so that puts the elements in one plane. Okay, and then if you go to the convoluted forces paper, you've got the 4 worlds, one descending into the next, that sort of thing. Now, if you took all the colors associated on each color scale and then spread them here, you have now basically, folded the cross up into a cube again. You now have the 4 worlds in the same plane. And I don't know if it's said anywhere in, say, the Zohar, but to do this, to take the 4 worlds and put them in the same plane so that you can see them from wherever you are, would be a sort of restoration. And that's what's symbolized in the vault on that, that diagram of the Pastels is the restoration. And the means by which the restoration is accomplished. So to me, to lay this out as a great puzzle, which they seem to have done, implies an intelligence well beyond Mathers and Westcott. They didn't figure this out over brandy and cigars on a long weekend. They either had very advanced teachers or they had some level of divine contact, which they do talk about in their private letters. The private letters do say that, Westcott says to Mathers, Raphael tells me this is his order. So I don't know what more I can say from there, that I'm really supposed to not say all this. That was the conclusion, going all the way back to Westcott's Flying Rule 15, where he says the empty spaces are there for you to fill or not. So the last question here is, okay, how do I use this? And more than anything, I mean, for practical magic, there are 2 areas that you really have to get a solid grip on. And one is contact with specific forces. You need more Mars in your life or whatever it might be. The answer that is hidden in plain sight, that GD people deny all the time, is offerings and sacrifice. And people outside the system who are trying to, get back to some kind of medieval lifestyle rather than the modern one, would tell you that offerings are a game changer, an absolute game changer. And this is easy to test. I think some of the recently published advice is really quite bad. There are reasons this was considered sacrilegious, and there were very good reasons you didn't do things like spill your own blood and stuff like that. It's also alive and well all over the world in folk magic, So offerings is definitely something to look into. And I'll say, This can be very, very simple and easy to accomplish with, say archangels. All you need is light and water. For the elementals that live in your backyard, sometimes if you leave them a little meat or eggs, these are very good and very much appreciated substitutes for blood, which problem with blood is if you're messing around with infernal spirits, they really like blood and they really will come back for more uninvited. And that's just not a road to go down, no matter how strong you are. And then, there is in the GE, again, hidden in plain sight, if you read the Z papers, there is what's supposed to be a Coptic prayer. And I don't think anyone's verified that, but Mather's denied writing it. There's an explanation that the wine is the blood of Osiris. And, if you just read that piece and take it as literal, there you have a way to make simple elements into the body and blood of a god, a sacrificed god. And, if you offer this to, well, I'll suggest anyone who knows their watchtower, add that little bit to the ritual itself. Cyrus and Ophirus, who was found perfect before the gods, have said, "These are the elements of my body." And it goes on and on. Then you go out to the quarters. And I mean, Regardie wrote this whole thing up in his book on the Watchtower Ritual. He didn't say very much about it, but it's worth trying, because then you offer it to the elemental beings in each quarter. I will, a lot of emphasis is put on the so-called Watchtower Ritual, which actually is the vault consecration ritual minus. Sometimes calling all the forces is not the way to get a thing done. It really isn't. And then so if you do that, you've got what you need. What you need is fire, but you've got water and air, and they're all, at the doggy dish because you made an offering. Well, now you have to say, I'm not gonna micromanage. I'd like you guys to get this done, and they have to work it out. And you have to say these things. You don't have to say them in Elizabethan English, but you have to say these things. And also, if you're making offerings for a particular thing, you must say, this is a one-time offering for the following. You have to be very, very clear, because certain I'm so tempted to say beings. Some of them will come back for more, and they'll find ways to get it. So you got to be very careful with this. And you have to be very, very specific. This is for X to happen. And I mean, sometimes why this works is it's a long conversation. And there are a lot of theories about why it would work. I would say try it and find out why. That's one area to look into for practical magic. The other is the elements themselves. Archangels and angels have a job already. They are mostly messengers, and that's mostly what they can do. Planetary forces also have their own areas that they control. The elements are more like raw material, and the various beings associated with elemental tablets have a hierarchy. The Brits loved hierarchy, and so there's a hierarchy. There's the prince of this and the king of that, and there's the guy at the bottom of the tablet who's like, I make the coffee. That's all he does. And you can ask them about that. But, you know, if you send them out for cigarettes, it's not going to work. And then there is also a hidden thing in the GD that's almost never mentioned and really not understood, which is the relationship between the elements. And this really comes from the Greeks. It's noted by Mathers in his comments in people's copies of this, and this is interesting to me. There were copies. I mean, people used to copy the diagrams and the more complex and interesting papers by hand. And their mentor would go through and add notes and stuff. And there are a few of these still around. And in a couple of the advanced papers, there are notes from Mathers where he refers back to the Greeks and the elements. And we can find this also in the cipher manuscript and the order in which the Eucharist is consumed. Now, throughout the system, the elements are presented sometimes in different orders, in different ways. You know, there's the order of elements in the hexagram ritual, which follows the zodiac. And there's the order of elements that we consume in the mystic repast. And the order of the elements according to the four winds, which can be related to many other things, you know, like the Grail Hallows. And, you know, you could, for instance, you could banish and use the names Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John just as easily as you could the names of the archangels. And the names of the archangels actually, you know, this all goes back into much older religious writing. But the Greeks had a very definite idea about the elements themselves. And there's a natural order, the way one changes into another, which can be undone and it can be pushed the other way. This happens to match the order in which you draw pentagrams. And there's the order of, you know, the Tablet of Union, and on and on and on. And this is one of the, I would say, major things to really understand in terms of practical application. And I believe that was the intent, because the wand carried by the chief adept is 4, not 5 elements. And it's not anywhere in the system except footnotes by Mathers that he added because people just weren't picking up on it. It's in those advanced papers, and you know, it points right back to Socrates. You can find this in the back of Agrippa's books. And it's kind of simple, but the actual application becomes very different. If we just accept that fire is the death of air, and that earth is the death of fire, and water is the death of earth, and air is the death of water, you gotta ask yourself why that would be true. And the other assertion is, well, the transformation can go the other way if you have a sufficient amount of what was listed as the second thing. That if you have enough wind, air becomes the death of fire. If you have enough, you know, that kind of thing. So it can go one way or it can go the other way. And these actually match the order in which active and passive pentagrams are drawn. So I believe this is really there, and that the intelligence behind this, once again, is like, who can, this is crazy. Why is this so deep? But there it is. And this this thing about the elements, if you learn it, And for all I know, they taught it, in lost papers. We don't, it hasn't all been published. It hasn't, some of it just exists in private collections. No one knows for certain. Or it was never taught. I don't really know. But it can easily be extended to say, well, I used to be very puzzled about the court cards because there was so much emphasis on them in the advanced papers where they've got, the tarot mapped to the constellations and all this kind of stuff. And then there's a ring of just the court cards. And I just thought, what? So what? Who cares about the court cards? That's how you decide if, that's how you pick a significator, right? And I didn't, but if you were to say, well, this is the prince of water, if, or if, this is king of fire, what are you talking about here? Well, we're talking about macrocosm and microcosm, right? Because the microcosm is the king and the macrocosm is fire. But is that 5 equals 6 or 6 equals 5? Because the king of fire is making the whole world be like himself, right? Is that how you would interpret that card? I'm still thinking about it, but I believe there's something there to be looked at more. I think there's a whole lot more to these two magical formulas than people generally suppose. Because, well, the death of Osiris is the separation of the elements to 4 quarters, right? And the vault has the macrocosmic order on the altar, but is surrounded by the microcosmic order of the elements. And in the vault, what takes place is the resurrection. We now have everything moving back in. This is worth thinking about a great deal. Very great deal. If you look at, well, the original way the pentagram ritual was taught, and it has been changed many times. But the way it was originally taught was at the end, you would say, before me are the pentagrams, behind me, the 6-rayed star. So this is the new adept walking out of the vault, because on the altar, the elements are organized like the macrocosm, not the microcosm. And, it might be, I actually have these diagrams in a paper. I have not circulated it, but feel free to ask. It's maybe easier to see with everything drawn out. And if you circulate this paper, I will come to your house, leave your phone off the hook, and eat all your food.
That's all?
You're welcome to come over and eat all our food anytime.
Right. Right.
Anyway,
I thought he was going to say that if we circulate this paper, he'll sign you up to a couple of email lists.
yeah. I do think this last thing with the elements was an area to investigate for practical reasons. People are very used to thinking of water and fire as opposites, but that's not really the way their setup or how they interact. And that's the whole thing to think about too. But say you're having a problem with a watery situation. Your options really, you might be tempted to apply fire. But really, once you learn the principles here, you need to apply either air or earth. Evaporate it or dam it up. And best to think about these things at length yourself. Well, those are the things that I wanted to go over today. So anybody else wants to talk or ask questions or?
Thank you very much for that, even though I think that this is information that has been relayed to us previously. It's always good to remember it and expand on it. It's very interesting because I had spoken to you that Tony had, who's a neophyte, has written a paper and has used scientific theory and formula to demonstrate that the spirit is what is missing from the elements, and that's what actually moves the elements back from one into another and helps either create the death of one into the other. And he's actually demonstrated, he's got a paper that he's with science, and obviously he's a scientist. So this is definitely not outside of the realm of anything that can't be proven, apparently. So I'm looking forward to reading this paper, and I'm sure that it will be shared with other members accordingly. So,
Well, I mean, here's hoping. We'll see. I would love to see those guys get into the inner order. The adding of the fifth element it's certainly symbolized in the portal, and this is the reason for the current password, is to add the fifth element, and the assumption is that everyone can do this. This is not trying to prove to your friends that you're smart as Aleister Crowley. They can play chess blindfolded and memorize all these tables. Some people can't do these things. Some people have other skills. Some people are incredibly gifted in their intuition. But the intellectual stuff also is one of the things recommended in Opera Melon. And he's not very specific about it, but in the course of, retreating from the world and getting it down to just various sacramental projects, and withdrawing from people and business and all this other stuff. He does say you need some sort of intellectual, maybe very abstract pursuit. And he says it could be math, or it could be music, or it could be anything. But and I don't see any reason to take every last thing Abramelin said as any sort of final word. But Mathers certainly thought it was important enough that everyone should study it. Not many people did it, and a few people kind of broke themselves in New Zealand in those temples. And there were some very, very kind of farm people, sort of superstitious folks in the old temple in New Zealand. They thought this one guy, who probably was going to go crazy anyway, really broke himself with Abramelin. And so then it was, keep that away. I also knew people who said, they knew somebody who read Ayn Rand and then killed herself. And so, no, you can't read Ayn Rand. But lots of people have read Ayn Rand and didn't kill themselves. Anything else? We should, okay. For the rest of this year,
I was gonna ask that.
we finally, in the end, we decided to do this one virtual, so people who can't always be here could be here. The vault is actually up, and if you're in town or you plan to be in town, this won't go on forever, I'm sure. So it is an opportunity to spend some time in the vault yourself. But we don't know that that'll last forever. We're thinking about a 5-6 in probably January, but that's not certain at this point. Beyond that, there are other projects. We're getting started on an extensive documentation project. Stop throwing the book at people. Say, yeah, you got to go buy Regardie's book. That stunned me back in the day. Thinking back, there are real problems with that. With just telling people go buy the book. One is the book's full of mistakes, and there are tables that have the wrong names or the wrong spelling, and there are diagrams that are missing things, and there's too much in it. It's 700 pages and it's stuff no one should read until later. So we really want to get away from that. And we're in the process of doing that. Lots of stuff to make and some things to replace, little things, big things. We've got these beautiful outer order Chiefs Lamans now.
Right. I was just going to say that. I'm so glad you did.
And, we should make more things of that quality and make better scripts and making better grade packets and so on. And I don't know if anyone cares about certificates, so you guys will have to opine.
Walter, just to go back to those Deus officer lamans that our Sora Maria made, the temple that we belonged to in the past, and Rebecca and John belonged to as well, both Johns, they never had those lamans. And so these aren't only new for us in our Thoth Hathor temple, but they're new period for us, and they're beautiful. And I think they are, I don't think I'm giving any game away except my own to say that I think they're part of the building of our inner order and the pathway from the outer order to the inner order, which is so critical, that our SOAR has made those Deus Officer Lamans, which are Lamans for the inner order. They're inner order Lamans for the outer order to be able to see. And that's a draw. And it brings people through the portal and into the inner order, in my opinion.
Leah, thank you. I'll be happy to continue my carving practicing for the Lamas.
We got all the tools. We bought them to make long.
I'm not sure about certificates though.
Yeah,
So thank you.
I don't know what to think about certificates. I personally, I hate to put a lot of time, because I would be very picky about it, into this if no one gives a shit. And you know, I don't know. So it's kind of up to you guys. I suppose the people who will care more are in the outer order. You know, get that practicus certificate, you know. I don't know.
I don't know, the certificates, they feel a little bit cheesy, you know, because certificate measures something very precise, like, okay, I mean, you did certain techniques, now you like getting the first cue in Aikido, you know?
Well,
mean,
yeah, but that exists for a reason, you know.
Right.
The cues in a martial art, you know, have maybe 2 or 3 reasons.
Your certificate is if you call an angel, you don't melt.
Right, I
That's
mean,
your
did you call an
certificate.
angel? Check mark, you get a certificate.
Or Samael, and you're not, you know, crawling on the ground. Like a
Nice.
worm.
I mean, I don't know.
I know, I was offered a certificate by an advanced person not long ago, and I really didn't know what to say. Like, so I want your name on a piece of paper so I can write some special numbers after my name. Is that the plan? Okay, you know, I don't really care. And whatever. So maybe that's a back burner project. We need better ways to take care of everything and keep track of everything. You know, where is everything now? Who's got the capes? Who's got the wands? Who's got the lamans? Where are they? I don't actually know. And you know, so we need to get all of that more organized. And you know, if we're going to need to travel some, we need to get better at that rather than lumping it all and, you know, on a couple of people. And one of the things I was kind of blown away by when we were in London was a particular ritual we intended and how quickly and quietly they took everything down, packed it up, and took it away to the various storage places on the tube. They had it all figured out, and it was impressive. But I mean, that's because they didn't want Tony Fuller scowling at them. Maybe, I don't know.
Is that scary?
Maybe I have to practice my scowl.
What do they use for packing and storage? Is it anything specific? Is it boxes? What is it?
I would say most of it was wrapped up and it was handled by enough people that just having it wrapped didn't matter.
Well, also some of their things were smaller. It would be difficult to
Well, they had a huge
protect a Hierophant's wand on a
Yeah.
subway train full of people. Just my opinion.
No, it's true. Well, I think we have to get a trunk for the wands and items for the altar and stuff, I think.
I mean, it also has to be easy to carry. Yeah, easy to
Well,
carry
at least 2
because
people that
not
can carry
everyone
and
can.
put it into like
Not
the
everyone
car.
can lift a whole bunch of things,
Right.
heavy stuff.
Um, yeah, well,
You know, fishing rod tubes, if you can get a big enough one, work kind of well for transporting wands and protecting them from getting bashed about while you're. That's one thing I've been kind of experimenting with.
Yeah,
It
the question is
depends on the
getting them wide
particular.
enough diameter.
Well, you know, if you have one that's made to accommodate I don't know, a saltwater reel. I don't know. I've been looking at that.
Yes, I had used one for regalia in a particular Masonic degree at one time, but it was the hard part of it was perhaps this wide, which isn't quite wide enough for some of the wands. And then the top portion where the reel would go was softer, but it certainly was better than nothing. Certainly was better than nothing. But I did get a sword home from when I went to pick it up at the airport in the baggage claim, and it had been bent. So, which is kind of, by the time you bring it back up to where it should be, they have a tendency to break.
Yeah.
So these things, as you say, need to be protected well if we're going to use them for traveling at all.
we might have to cut some of them down. They're a little long. Eddie did things like that. Eddie made the original Chief of Depths one that was, it was this big. All right, it was twice that big.
So as big as my computer screen.
Well, and Patricia could barely lift it.
Right. Well, the worst was the Carex's wand, whichever one that was that had been made with the
Right.
snakes and the heads.
But
And
that's one of the problems right there with the Rigardi book, is things that were copied incorrectly and then repeated and repeated and repeated.
because it's not
It was not a caduceus.
and they would people would break them all the time.
Yeah.
Necessarily not from a desire to not take good care of it, but just it's very heavy and very big, and people would break them. Wands really don't work quite as well once they've been broken.
Yeah, I know, I haven't talked to her in years, but I know the woman who built the zinc vault, which was huge. It would take maybe 20 people. And she was in the outer order when she built all this stuff, and she had no idea. And she made the wand the way it is in Chick's book. And it looks huge. It looks absolutely huge. And Chick has a picture of him holding it. There's a picture of Rigardi holding it. After which Rigardi said, "This is too damn big," because it was, why is it too big? Well, you can't hold it in the pastos. How about that?
Yeah.
It was huge. And she actually had to remake the one she had made because it didn't fit in the pastos at all.
You mentioned the vault earlier, and I'd just like to kind of pound on that a bit. Having been in the vault fairly recently, I had forgotten how beautiful those colors are, and how much they impact you being inside the vault. The walls are incredible. So I highly recommend a visit if at all possible. More than one being even better.
Yeah. Yeah, there is if you are a internet person and you're looking at vaults that are out there, it's really disappointing. Griffin kind of followed Rigardi's lead of doing some kind of tint to the whole wall. And his looks very pastel. And then Zinc did a white outline around every square. And it looks awful, really. The Fari Raw Vault was very, very earthy colors
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
a little on the dark side. But interesting, very interesting. And they did it a very different way too. They had somebody cut out every square and cut out every symbol and glue it to the square to make painting easier. And then they passed them out and somebody painted them all. And various members painted them. And it's utterly cryptic. No one knows what the color scheme means in the Fari Raw Vault. Pat Zaleski had no idea. And the other guys from New Zealand were not certain, because in some places it's like they reverse things. You know, you go to the Mars wall and the Mars square is not green on red, which, you know, it's everything is the complementary color is the symbol and the force it represents is the background. And that's almost always the way it is. And they didn't do that on the planetary squares and some of the other squares when they were in their home place, apparently. But no one's figured it out at all. And, you know, Pat, of course, said, it doesn't matter. It's not important. Okay. Okay. It can be not important. So we put a lot of thought into how we did this after looking at what everybody else did. The Cicero's vault is kind of bright, and Tony Fuller hated it. He told me, like Disneyland, because it's brighter than the, you know, it's almost cartoony. And if you look at Tabitha's tarot deck, I understand her sense of color. I don't particularly like it. You know, it doesn't appeal to me.
It is a bit cartoony.
Yeah, well, but that's one of the better sets of photographs out there. You know, the Griffin Vault looks like, you know,
Something else.
somebody's Paisley Nehru shirt is what it looks like.
You know, the other thing with visiting the vault itself, our vault itself, it's an accumulator of sorts. If you've ever seen any of the orgone accumulators from the 1930s or so, or even now as people make them, the more people come and visit the vault, the more there is to the vault to come and visit. And the more we work in it, the more that's there to draw on. And that's really the big thing is, in my opinion, as you were talking about drawing down for the Kabbalistic cross, that admonition that we that we repeated as we were opening the vault today, that is very much like the inner order Kabbalistic cross, and can be used in all kinds of ways as the Kabbalistic cross can be also, so that it's the candidate isn't just admonished about it by the chief adept. The candidate it's bestowed on the candidate, given to the candidate. He or she is not told to use it, but there isn't anything in the GD that one shouldn't be experimenting with using. And just a couple of thoughts about the vault and that beautiful admonition.
Something else that I should emphasize The LVX signs have a different, I think very different use than the Kabbalistic cross. Sometimes people interchange them. They substitute one for the other in various books and things like that. I think it's a mistake. I believe the Kabbalistic cross and the great signs work very differently. And that the Kabbalistic cross is how you reach up and get some. The LVX signs is how you elevate yourself to where it is. And, you know, you need to look at it that way when you do it. And you need to really think about all the things that are said about the, you know, there's the zodiacal attribute and the which on the surface looks easy, like, oh, they just knew they could say that. It doesn't mean anything, but it does. And the Egyptian association means something very, very important. And what you're doing is you're actually moving yourself up with each sign from death to exaltation. And it actually goes death to loss, to exaltation, and then a kind of center piece at the end. And that's really quite different from the Kabbalistic cross. And it's not so much reaching up from the depths, but moving your entire being up. And if you take that and you superimpose it over the things suggested in the various diagrams and rituals like Ritual K, the ball consecration ritual, which sort of puts you at the center of the universe. These things are meant to work together, just like, you know, the point meditation and the sign of the Emperor are meant to work together. You know, right from the beginning, they were doing this, and people have often missed it because they were more interested in, you know, other even more esoteric, strange things. I would, you know, I'd like to conclude my remarks by saying, you know, everyone should review the oath and then, you know, pour yourself a drink and contemplate why you took the oath.
Before you conclude anything, I have a question that might be a little
Go.
off the wall, a little maybe out of it. But earlier you mentioned that when working with the four worlds and the convoluted forces, and the color scales would allow them to be almost placed on the same plane.
Yeah.
Is there any relationship to the dragon formulas and the planetary forces that are represented in the dragon formulas, so that the planetary symbols combine the colors in the different worlds?
Well,
Or is that too far out there?
it's
other words-
no, it's something to be investigated. And I mean, the dragon formula itself can be kind of morphed against the four elements. So each dragon, even though the overriding force is fire, you know, you could say you have all four forces. If you want to get to the planetary forces and Sephirotic forces and the other colors, I don't know that anyone has pushed it that far. or what you might get out of it. What I'm really describing here is, the convoluted forces represents the world as it is. And that all four worlds in the same plane, or at least accessible to each other than by the hourglass shown in the convoluted forces, is the restoration, right? So that's somewhere in the future. And I'm saying this because Mathers in the convoluted forces, or maybe a different paper, but he's describing, he's describing the Earth and the zodiac swirling around it, and that the Earth is, tilted at 13 degrees. And he says it's actually pointed towards Bina. And he says, how long, oh Lord, how long till this gets set right? And that, that's why the world is a veil of tears. It's tipped to Bina. And so his map of everything is the world as we find it. And these other possibilities are, the world that could be someday, if we just initiate enough people. And then, I think all those forces are implied. Yeah. So someone needs to look into what about the dragon formula after the restoration.
Okay, that was my question.
That's an interesting question. And so, here we are. We're all collectively hanged men, waiting for the pandemic to go away, and waiting for, the green economy, and waiting for all these things that aren't happening right now. And so, can we meet publicly? Can we put 12 people in the vault again? Don't know yet. We're still waiting. And it's kind of a question in my mind, what is actually going to change, and what we'll be able to do in the future. And we may need to do a lot more. And it's certainly more appropriate for the inner order that, well, you got to do your own work anyway, and we're just talking, and, that sort of thing. And there may be, more of this next year and the year after. We don't really know right now. And I don't know. I'll make a few more videos from time to time, like I used to, when something strikes me as, oh, we got to talk about this, or whatever. Or if somebody has a question, if somebody's having trouble with the oath, if any of these things come up, just ask. Well, that's all I got. I mean, thank you all for coming.
I have something to say.
Say it.
I don't think I ever met Fran, so I just wanted to introduce myself. My name is Maria. I don't think we ever met in person or even on Zoom. I don't believe so.
So she's saying hi.
Thanks for translating, yes. Hi, Fran. Maybe Fran doesn't hear me. I'm not sure. Maybe she does.
She might be.
She hears you. Her headphones don't have a mic, Maria.
Oh, I see. I see. It's just, I think, the first time that we meet.
I met friends years ago at the Sun. She came in one time.
Yeah, I think I've been
Maybe
initiated
10 years
after.
ago.
Probably 10 years ago.
I joined 9 years ago, so yeah, I think.
It's been a while,
Mhm.
but it's nice to see you, Fran.
Yes.
I don't know if you can hear me or not, right?
There you go.
Yes,
We can hear
Look
you.
at that.
You
we can
can hear
now.
me.
Woohoo.
Oh, well, I need a new computer. I haven't been able to hear all of it really well, but I've enjoyed all of it. And I've enjoyed meeting you all also. So I haven't been there very long, a long time.
Well, we're still in business somehow.
My earphones don't have a mic.
I like to think that God has our back. But
That's all right, friend.
Thank you.
Fran and
I'm
Rebecca and
really
I
glad
go
that
way
you
back.
recorded this. I'm sorry.
That's all right. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that I'm really glad that you recorded this, Walter. I'm going to be re-listening to it because you covered a lot of ground there.
I would
There's
like
a lot, and there's a lot to
listen to
chew
it.
up there.
Well, there's a tremendous amount of material presented for study, and each of the things is really just the tip of an iceberg, and the parts that overlap. And if you want the full picture of almost anything, you have to, put in a lot of time. You don't always need to, and it can seem really overwhelming, which, often gets people stuck. It's just more than they can take in.
Just to say one thing about that, I don't know that it applies to everything, but in some areas, Kabbalah is one of them. When something seems overwhelming and too much to do, that's Anubis at the gate that wants to get the grip and the word so you can pass by. So it is an obstacle to be overcome when one feels overwhelmed. Just a thought.
So we didn't see Patrick today. Wonder. Probably my fault.
We didn't see Layla,
No.
but we will. People have lives. I'm
Hmm.
glad you recorded it for that reason too.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you'll be hearing from us about getting, or you'll certainly be hearing from me about getting a copy of the paper, which is not to be shared.
And from
Yeah,
me
that
as
paper's
well.
got
Yes.
many other things into it, stuffed away in there too. Like, what if you move the elements through the areas of the other elements? What does that mean?
Right.
And one day, you really have to decide how you might use that for something.
Like that was.
It's not always obvious, and sometimes it is, and sometimes it isn't. I think that if you look at Z2, it'll become more obvious how, to use things, because that's all what Z2 is. Takes the simplest ritual and applies it every considerable way, every imaginable way. I think the assumption was that you would do this with the other rituals. Oh, there's been none of that published or boasted about that I've seen. So anybody else, anything else? Questions, comments, wish list, needs?
Just waiting for Santa.
Ah, yes. Okay, well, I do think, I'm really hoping that we will be advancing Shelley to 5.6 in early January. I don't know yet, and well, you know, maybe now's not the time. We don't yet know. One of the ways you know is actually outlined in the ritual when the candidate is pounding on the door saying, let me in. I'm a 4-7. I deserve this, you know, that kind of thing. And people don't do that till they're ready. So we'll see. And you know, if someone's not pounding on the door, why do we want them? How will they serve? So what's the, so if we want to shut this down here, everyone must give the signs and then close the veil. Yeah. So, I declare that I have closed the portal of the vault of the NFT. Thanks for coming, everyone. And well, we'll see some of you soon, and we'll see some of you later.
Thank you, Walter.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good to
Thank
see
you
you
very much
all.
indeed.
Good to see you, John, and good to see you, Fran.
Thank you.
Everyone,
Good to see
John,
everyone.
Fran, Laura.
Can't see Rebecca. She's
Can't
got
see
angel.
Rebecca. I was gonna say Rebecca and I stopped. I said, no, it's a picture.
Rebecca is showing her true self, I guess. I don't know.
Aw.
Completely aspirational.
There you go.